Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. In this video, I'm going to show you the most effective way on how to trap a Christian when he likes to say, "Where is Muhammad in the Bible?" Because the Quran apparently says Muhammad will be in the Bible. Now, as you know, the Muslims actually quote certain verses in the Bible to prove that Prophet Muhammad is prophesied. It's mentioned there. Now, the Christian uses a different standard when it comes to Prophet Muhammad. They specifically want him mentioned by name and the verses giving clear, explicit identification, like as if they want his age, his name, his last name, his mother's name, his father's name, his daughter's name, But when we look at what a typical prophecy is in the Bible, it doesn't do any of that. It vaguely mentions the person. And we see this even mentioned about Jesus Christ. He's not even mentioned by name in the Old Testament. And when it is mentioned, it is not, by his name. For example, Emmanuel, that name is not even mentioned in the New Testament, and Jesus is not even mentioned in the Old Testament. Yet they make a correlation between the two. It only gives descriptions like a son will be born and this and that, but it doesn't give you explicit details. Yet when the Quran says you will find him in the Bible, it's saying to the Christians, look at Prophet Muhammad in the way you look for Jesus in the New Testament. Look in that same similitude. And of course, the Prophet Muhammad is actually mentioned in that same similitude. Now, you'll see in this discussion, it's going to be really short and so effective that I'm going to trap a Christian when he tries to say this. He says, "Oh, Muhammad is not mentioned in the Bible." Now, this is the question that you need to ask him. Ask him whether Apostle Paul is actually mentioned in the Old Testament, because Christians like to say, "Oh, look, Paul is a prophet and he's an apostle. Prophet Muhammad is not." Yet they try and say, "Oh, look, we need to see Prophet Muhammad being prophesied." Yet you ask them, "Why isn't Paul being prophesied?" Then they suddenly say, "Oh, but we don't need to see Prophet Paul mentioned, but we do need to see Prophet Muhammad mentioned because your Quran apparently says he's in the Bible." So if they do that, just give them 1 John 4:1 to 4:2. And in this verse, it says, and the Christian posted it, his name is John, he says in 1 John 4:1, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you will know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist." So what is the criteria? This spirit is a prophet. Notice that the prophet and the spirit is the same thing. If he's a truthful spirit, he has to confess that Jesus has come from God. And of course, the Prophet Muhammad confessed that Jesus is a prophet of God. He came from God. So that means that the Prophet Muhammad is a true prophet. If he denied Jesus coming from God, then that would make him a false prophet. Now, I know what a Christian will say. A Christian will say, "Oh, but Prophet, Muhammad denies Jesus' sonship and he denies Jesus' divinity." But notice in 1 John 4:1, it doesn't say any of that. It just says whether Jesus came from God, period. Whether you want to add all those other theological points, that's irrelevant to this verse, because this verse specifically says, does he come from God? And yes, the Prophet Muhammad said, yes, Jesus does come from God, full stop. And remember before I said this is how you can trap a Christian? When a Christian says, this isn't talking about Prophet Muhammad, ask the Christian, say to him, is Muhammad mentioned in 1 John 4:1 and 4:2? Yes or no? If he says yes, then he needs to explain why it's a yes. Is it yes in the context of that he is a truthful spirit? If that is true, then he has to accept Prophet Muhammad. If it's in the context of him saying, no, he's not in there, then is the Christian telling us that the Prophet Muhammad is not a lying spirit in this verse? Is it not prophesizing a false spirit? In this case, the Christian actually said, and I asked him, his name is John Dedon, I asked him, I said, is Muhammad mentioned in 1 John 4:1 and 4:2? Yes or no? He said no. Look, as you can see in the comment, he said no. So then I said to him, so Muhammad is not a false spirit mentioned in 1 John 4:1, nor is he the truthful spirit? So is this verse, as he claims, calling the prophet not a false prophet? Right? Because if he says yes, he is in this verse, then that means the Prophet Muhammad is in the Bible. If he says no, he's not in this verse, then he would have to confess that the Prophet Muhammad is not a false spirit. So then I asked John, I said, so Muhammad is not a false spirit mentioned in 1 John 4:1. And he didn't want to answer. He actually fled. He goes, you want to see where Muhammad is mentioned? Like he's talking about Muhammad being mentioned somewhere else. So he's not even answering the question. As you can see, he actually disappeared from the page. So the bottom line is this, folks. When a Christian says, Muhammad is not in my Bible, then how can a Christian say Muhammad is a false spirit or a false prophet, when apparently he's not even the false spirit in 1 John 4:1? And if he is mentioned in 1 John 4:1 as the false spirit, well, he could also be mentioned as the truthful prophet in 1 John 4:1 as well, because it gives the confirmation of what makes him a truthful prophet, and that is if he confesses that Jesus has come in the flesh. And the Quran time and time again mentions Jesus coming from God, be and it is. That's how he was created, like Adam, and he came from God. He's actually one of the mightiest prophets of Islam. So that, in a nutshell, my friends, traps a Christian when he tries to deny that the Prophet Muhammad is actually in the Bible. If he is in the Bible, then he's either a false prophet or a truth prophet. But the bottom line is he has to be in the Bible, because it mentions it in 1 John 4:1 that there are false prophets and there are truthful prophets. So the next time a Christian says, oh, your Quran says that my Bible is supposed to have Muhammad in there, so where is Muhammad? We'll show him the verse. And he can only say one of two things, obviously. He will obviously say, yes, he is in my Bible, but he's mentioned as a false prophet. Or he will say, which obviously he won't say unless he converts to Islam, that yes, he is mentioned there, and he is a truthful prophet. What he can't say is that he's not mentioned there. He's not mentioned. Because if he does do that, then he has to concede that his Bible does not condemn Prophet Muhammad as a false prophet. And that's it. That's how you debunk a Christian.